Starting the recording and then we start. Yeah, so welcome to our Epoch Community webinar. Our facilitator for this webinar today is David Luswata. David is an experienced mapping project manager and technical advisor and trainer with extensive skills in OpenStreetMap and Qgis. David has led a number of mapping projects in both urban and rural settings. David has worked with HOT in Liberia, in Botswana, in Ghana, in Uganda, Mali, and Tanzania on different projects focused on disaster preparedness and response, as well as service delivery. Yeah, previously he led the West African mapping project in the border regions of Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia with the American Red Cross. And also worked extensively with the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, conducting and leading mapping activities to support national statistical management and the implementation of the national population and housing census. Yeah, David is also a board member for OpenMap Uganda and also a member of the OSM community in Uganda. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for facilitating today's webinar. So I'll hand over to you now and we continue the rest of the webinar. Thank you. Yeah, we can see your screen now, so feel free to put this in presentation mode and continue whenever you are ready.
Cool. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, thanks Geoffrey for that introduction. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. As we talk about setting up for field mapping and data collection, we do note that this is not a very good time to be doing field mapping, of course, according to the current situation and the restrictions around field mapping activities. So it probably, one would look at it as not the very best time to be encouraging people and showing people how to do community mapping, but we thought it indeed is a great time. For example, if you do want to do data collection for when this situation stabilizes, then this would be a good time for you to start planning that and putting things in place for that mapping work to be done. So thanks for joining us again, and let's go deep into it right now. So setting up a community mapping or field mapping project takes quite a bit of steps, and in this presentation of this webinar, we want to look at a number of those steps that are taken in order to have your community mapping successful. It's one thing to do community mapping and then not be able to achieve what you set out to achieve. So in this session, we want to really look at the entire flow of community mapping, bring it from remote mapping, going into preparing for the field mapping activities, where you do data model creation, and of course you create forms, prepare MB tiles, you look up the different tools that you're going to use, most especially mobile data collection tools if you're going to use those. The other component that we want to also address is community preparation, whereby the community you're going to work with, you're going to map, needs to be very well prepared for you in order to support you in your mapping activities, and not see you as someone who is probably collecting information that will be used against them, say by the local authorities or the government. Then also we'll look at the training sessions and the community mapping itself, which then leads us into cleaning the data, designing the products that you want to make out of the data, and then sharing this data. Because then we really want the data to be shared and used by the different people. So the process is this really, in which we do, I've looked at it as comprising of 3 major components, which will probably ensure that you actually do have a very successful data collection activity. One of those is the preparation. Preparation is key, both on your side as the team organizing this community mapping, as well as the community and the stakeholders that you have in that project. So you need to be prepared on that front, prepare your data sets, prepare your forms, your equipment you're going to use, prepare
Yes.
the...
So, sorry, David, we are putting the agenda slide. I just wanted to know if you're not transitioning through that slides.
Okay. I've transitioned. Okay. Do you see that now?
No, it's still showing the
Okay.
another like screen. You have
Okay.
like different screens. Maybe you can stop sharing and share.
Okay. Okay. Just see. Okay. How is that?
Yeah. Yeah, now we're in the slide show.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'll let me begin afresh here. So the data collection process, in our experience as a humanitarian OpenStreetMap team and several other agencies and organizations that do collect data, we do agree indeed that the 3 phases of your data collection process are really key in helping you achieve the goals of your data collection exercise. One of those is preparation, in which you really want to engage and have your community where you'll be collecting the data, as well as the stakeholders that will be participating in that activity, including say the government agencies or the multilateral organizations that are really funding you for that exercise. So you really want to have everybody on board, including yourself, preparing your different tools and forms and equipment that you're going to use for the data collection. Then the second step there becomes the actual field mapping, which you'll be heading out in the field and working with the community, working with your volunteers and your entire team to do the data collection. So that's step number 2. And then the third step is where you are back from the field. You really want to clean that data before you can share it up with everyone else, checking the data, ensuring that you collected what you really intended to collect in the first place. And then you can share that data with your stakeholders and also use it in the different follow-up activities or the different activities, especially that data collection was intended for, because we collect data to use it. So that's the third step. Now, I also want to mention and note that remote mapping is really central to field data collection and field mapping. This is really, really helpful in a number of ways. One of those is in planning your logistics. If you are going to collect data in a particular city or a village in rural parts of the country, you will do well if you actually do a remote map those areas, so that you know where people live, you know where the different roads are, and you have all that information prior to actually hitting the ground. That helps you quite a lot. But we're saying it helps you in logistical planning, as well as ensuring that you cover the entire area of interest that you intend to map. If you want to map an entire village, if you first do remote mapping, then you are able to actually see the entire extent of the village and where people live, so that you can plan to cover all of that area. It also helps you with precision in data collection, in that you go where features are located. If you're mapping buildings, then you'll just go where those buildings are located, because you first traced these in remote map from satellite imagery during the remote mapping process. And at HOT, of course, we do quite a lot of this, and I think many of you on this webinar today are contributors to OpenStreetMap, and you've done remote mapping, so thank you for that. But I also should stress that if you're planning a field mapping project, this is a very good starting point for you. Then after you have prepared your area of interest with in the remote mapping phase, you go ahead and then engage with your team, especially your core team that you're working with, to determine the number of tools that you're going to be using in that exercise. There are several mobile applications that are useful for data collection. So you need to know what you're going to use, so that you prepare the tools you need and the forms you need according to the specifications of that application. So for us at HOT, really, we do focus on enabling the different on enabling the mapping of many different features and customizing data collection to the use cases, ensuring that maps are locally and relevant to and flexible. This means then we do engage the different stakeholders, we do engage the different clients. For instance, if we are conducting a project that we've been contracted to do, then we actually do engage those different organizations or teams that are bringing us on board to plan and prepare for this field mapping, which is really key for you as well. You may be a community member, it may be a community of a particular country that is planning to do mapping in a particular city. So it's important that you really do work with your leaders in that particular city, or the municipal authorities that are bringing you on board to help them with that mapping. The other is data models, creating the data models, and that's one of the things we're going to look at in a demo later in this webinar. But a data model is really key in helping you to determine, number one, the features you're going to map, and then two, the attributes you're going to map. So in creation of the data model, you do really have consultations with the different project partners, the different stakeholders, and several other especially stakeholders, really, because you want to make sure that the data you collect is helpful and useful for the different stakeholders that are within your project team and are going to use your data. And then lately, because of the advances in technology and having quite a number of applications, so you will, as I mentioned earlier, be able to determine which applications you're going to use for your data collection. I just mentioned a few examples here. It may be OpenDataKit or DK Collect, or it may be OpenMapKit. Some people have used maps.me. And you may use OSM and as a host of other applications. So you will determine what is suitable for you, of course, also depending on the skill sets of the team that is doing the data collection. And then some of these applications will need MBTIs, which is one of the things we're going to look at in this project, in this webinar, in that you are able to prepare these MBTIs beforehand, before you head out into the field, before you start the activities. It's really important that these are already prepared. So we'll be looking at that as well. The next component there is engaging the community members, as well as recruiting your different participants in the project, who we are calling mappers at this point. So you really want to be able to go out in the communities engage the local leaders, engage the community members, and tell them we're going to actually be doing a community mapping project in this area, in this community, and we would really like to have your input into what we are going to do, into what we are going to be doing in this oops, so about that. Back to the presentation. Okay, so we'll be doing data collection in this area, and we would like to have your input. We'd like to engage you and see. All you're doing there is actually making sure that the community you're going to be working in the next 3-4 weeks, or it could be a week, isn't hostile to you when you are there with your team. So that's really key, and we do emphasize that and do encourage the different communities to have this as part of their process. And also, in addition to engaging the communities and preparing them for this community mapping that is going to come up, you really want to have some of the community members participating in your activities. That's really important. We've found that it's part of the skills sharing effort that we do or we can have in a project whereby you're doing mapping in a particular part of the city, you are engaging and having members from that particular community participating in the project. So that's another step that you really want to engage in. The other is training sessions. You really want to prepare your mappers and your volunteers very well with these skills that they're going to be using during the mapping activities. So you do bring together mappers. Sometimes we've had training sessions where mappers had never used smartphones, or they had never done community mapping before. So a training session for such groups of people and mappers is really important. And you usually want to collaborate with your project partners to select who participates in that, in your training and eventually in the mapping activities. And there are several types of mapping that you may be thinking about. Maybe you want to go out and map water points, or you want to go out and map buildings, or just conduct surveys, speaking to different households and different people, or you want to map solid waste collection points. So it depends on really what you want to map. Then it could be even boundaries. We've had projects where we've worked on mapping of boundaries, working with local leaders and the mapping institutions in these countries and cities. So depending on what your project is, then you will head out and do the actual mapping, having had all the above sections really worked on. You've engaged the community, you've done the training, you've prepared your forms, you've prepared your tools, you have done the remote mapping of your area. Then you can head out into the field. Remember, we're talking about having a successful community mapping project. So you can see that up until this point, there are a number of steps that we've taken that are really relevant to this actual work of the field mapping. And so once you're done with your community mapping, your field mapping, you do want to clean that data, because as we mentioned, sometimes the mappers we work with may not have worked with smartphones before, or they may have worked with smartphones before, but they could have made typos while entering some of these details. So you really want to check this information that has been collected in the field, and then ensuring that it is properly collected, and so that when you share it, you're not sharing errors. We should also mention that when you're in the field, you are sending this data to a server. There are several servers that can be used. One of those is the OpenMapKit server that really works well with the OpenMapKit application, but you can also use it not necessarily working with OpenMapKit, but you can have ODK and other data collection tools connecting to that server. And many people do use the Kobo toolbox COBOL server to collect data, so you can use that as well. And several other servers that you can actually set up, and as long as they're able to receive data from the field, from the different mobile applications that you're using for your data collection. So we've found in our experience that usually having a team dedicated to data cleaning is really helpful, because then you are able to have eyes on the data as it comes in from the field. You are able to have a team of people looking at it and looking at the data as it comes in. So if your data collection exercise is for 2 weeks, then maybe you do the first day and second day everyone in the field, then the third day, starting the third day, you have a dedicated team of about maybe 4 or 5 people who are looking at the data as it comes in. They're then able to give feedback to the team that is going out every day in the field. So that has been really helpful. Yeah, we should also mention it's really helpful for skills transfer. For instance, if you have a team of your mappers who are in the field, then you can have others looking at the data. Again, you're having these different skills spread across your team. So we should underline here that data cleaning is really essential in this community mapping project that you're planning to do or that you'll be doing, because you want to share data that is clean, that is checked. And once you share it, then it's going to be used by the different government agencies, NGOs, and individuals who really want to use it. And now, once you do clean your data, the next step there is creating products out of the data that you collected. Many times you're going to create map products. You probably want to visualize the data you've collected as a map. Could be just a simple static map. It could be maybe a bigger one that's a wall map, or it could be a booklet that you want to generate from your data. The key here is once you have your data cleaned, then you are able to visualize it. You're able to, create maps out of it. And here you can actually use Qgis. If that's the tool that you use, that's the software you use. You can use Qgis. Some people use ArcGIS to be able to create these map products. So regardless of what you want to use, the next step there is creating map products. And as we've mentioned, you can use very easily UMap as a dynamic map tool that can be used to visualize your data. So that's really important as well. Maybe I should also mention that in the data cleaning part, you really want to use QGIS. Sometimes you can use JOSM. In fact, we should say most of the time we use JOSM, the Java OpenStreetMap editor, to clean the data, but you can also use Excel or LibreOffice to clean your data. Okay, so once you've created the products, the next step is sharing your data. Many times we really push the data back to OpenStreetMap. Remember, we began with remote mapping where you downloaded the data. So from OSM, you downloaded that data. Now you've cleaned it. You want to share back to the community. You want to send it back to the community and share it in OpenStreetMap. Many people also use HDX, and I think it's actually becoming a very wonderful tool that is a go-to tool for many humanitarian workers, where if you're looking for a data set in a particular country, you will go to HDX, copy that, download the data set, or check if it's there. And if it's not, then you can look at other sources. But HDX is one of those tools that I'd like to recommend for you to share your data, but on top of OpenStreetMap, of course, which is a go-to tool for everyone right now or currently. Now, in addition to sharing your data in those different platforms, you want to probably organize a workshop or pay courtesy visits to the different offices that of the different stakeholders that worked with you in your project. So regardless of what you want to do, I think it's great to share back this information with the community members. Maybe you may make wall maps that will be pinned on the offices of the local authorities, notice boards, or that will be sitting in the rooms of those different authorities, you know, at any one point. So you can organize that. You can organize those share back sessions and then get everyone to receive that data that you've cleaned and the products that you've worked with and produced. And finally, I think here, before we go into the demonstration aspect of this webinar, we have developed a toolbox at HOT. It's toolbox.osm.org. So you can actually go to that toolbox, which really documents so many of the things that we've covered in this presentation. So you can go to the to the toolbox and then download some of the things there. So I'll be looking at that as well later on. At this point, if you have any questions, maybe we can take them, but I would like to go into showing you how, say, a data model can be created. And we will look at creating Amenity House and creating field mapping sections, because if you have an area of the city that you're going to be mapping, it's really important to divide it out into smaller sections that will be manageable by 2 to 3 mappers in a day.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yes, we have some questions on the chat, so I'll read them out one by one as we take them. One is from Sophie. Can you list the server options? Is it like OpenMapKit plus Kobo? What are the server options?
Yeah, I think, yeah, the server options, I'm going to say the most, the commonest ones we are using are OpenMapKit server and Kobo toolbox. Now, it depends on what kind of data you're going to be collecting. So the server option should be determined by the data you're going to collect. And to that, let me say, if you're going to collect point data, you're going to collect line data, polylines, for example. You're going to collect polylines. You're going to collect points. Your data is going to be made of just point locations. You can use Kobo Toolbox for that. If you're going to collect polygons, if you're going to collect, say, buildings, you're going to collect, especially buildings, you really want to use OpenMapKit. And I think Kobo is not really yet built for collection of, I don't know if they've made improvements to that now, but for that, for buildings and polygons, you're going to want to use OpenMapKit server.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, another question is from Janet. She's asking if you can give some examples of data cleaning. I don't know if you have that in the demo.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I will add that.
And then Remigio is asking.
I'll demonstrate as well.
There's another question from Remigio. In the data model, how to distinguish between standard and non-standard tags, also between settlement and non-settlement tags, and what are MB tiles?
Okay. Great. Simply put, MB tiles are base maps. They just provide you with a base map in your application that you can, while you are out in the field, you are able to see, depending on how you created your MB tile, maybe you will just have OSM data, or you have imagery as that background. So those are MB tiles. Okay, what was the other one?
Yeah, the other two questions from Remigio were how to distinguish between standard and non-standard tags. And also
Yeah.
the difference between a settlement and the non-settlement tags.
Okay. So standard tags and non-standard tags. I think the Remedios is talking about OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap has what we call a map features. There is a wiki for map features. I think this is it, that actually shows you the different tagging of different features in OpenStreetMap. So this is like a go-to tool for me when I'm preparing data models, because then here I can see how features are tagged and in OpenStreetMap. So for that, this is like the standard. There are some features there are some tags that you want to include in your data collection, which are not yet in OpenStreetMap, which are not yet recognized by the OpenStreetMap database. So some of those, you can still collect those, but we don't encourage uploading those to OpenStreetMap because then they need to be fast checked by the community. You can propose new tags that you want to use. And there's a process for accepting tags and having these tags come up to this level. But let's be clear that what you collect from the field should not necessarily be what is on this wiki. If you have a local use of a particular data set or a particular tag, please go ahead and collect that. But when it comes to sending data to OpenStreetMap, pushing it to OpenStreetMap, you will need to adhere to this wiki, to the map features wiki here. And settlement tags and non-settlement tags, yeah, I think that is in the context of refugee settlements, I think. And non-refugee settlements, again, there is, there's a way refugee settlements are tagged, and maybe Remigio can confirm if this the context is talking about it. Yeah, but you can
Yeah,
you can
maybe I
map
can.
those features.
Yeah, I was asking
Yeah, please.
like you can give more information about what you meant by settlement and non-settlement tags.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another question from Victor. From your experience, what is trainable to community members? Can they map more complicated data as well? For instance, topography, water depth.
Yeah, so it really depends on, I don't want to refer it to that way. I don't want to refer to it as categories, but I could use that for the purpose. It depends on which community members you have. For instance, you may just have local residents in a particular neighborhood, or your community may be made up of students who at university studying, it may be, so it depends on the group of community members you have, and that will come back to you as the leader of that activity to assess and see the levels of your different mappers, and then you can choose who to assign to what mapping activity. But what we've seen is that once you have a training session, even if someone has never used a smartphone, they usually turn out well in terms of going out and selecting the different features, the different forms. It's usually not been a problem. But it then means you need to give those users, those community members, enough training days where it's not just in class, in a room, in a hotel, but you are out in the field as well, showing them the different sections of the forms. So yeah, depending on the group of volunteers you have, you can really engage them. We've done, say, a bit of complicated mapping. Say you have tools that you're using to map map drains, for example. You have custom tools that you've made and that require measurements. So your team needs to be able to understand that and be able to give you the results you expect.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think you can go ahead with your demonstration, and I think you can take more questions at the end after your demonstration. We still have some more. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Now, okay, cool. So for our demo, I'm going to look at a few things. Let me share the screen one more time. Okay, so creating, I'm going to look at how do you create a data model, and I've already mentioned here that I think I should just tag this in here. One of the things we rely on is this very wiki, the OSM map features wiki, that tells you the standard tags that you can use in OpenStreetMap and then the other tags that you are going to use or you're not going to be able to include in OpenStreetMap. So as I mentioned during the presentations, one of the things you really want to do is to engage your I'm calling them clients, but I do imagine that when you're conducting a community mapping project, you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for maybe local authorities there, or you're doing it for some agency. You could do it for yourself as well. So that means you need to engage most of the stakeholders who are going to benefit from that data. But I mentioned you need to engage your client. That's what I'm calling clients here, to determine the features you're going to use. Now, I'm going to take an example of, say you're doing community mapping in Bamako, Mali. We do have a project in Bamako that's we're actually working on. So I'll borrow some of that for use in this demonstration. Now, in that project, you're going to know who your stakeholders are, and you really want to use them to give you some input. Okay. So I'll call it community mapping. I'll state my stakeholders here. Of course, by the time you start your activities, you already have this. I'll say we have OSM Mali, for example, which is the community. We have ADR, which is the regional agency that's working with us. We have the Red Cross that is joining us for that. So depending on how many stakeholders we do have ONAV, for example, that's another one. So you have that. Now you engage these to determine the features that you're going to be mapping in your activity. So in this case, we are going to be mapping, and for this, I think I've just highlighted only 2 water points that we are going to be mapping, and then we are going to be mapping buildings as well. But you can have a list of so many of them. You can have a list of, maybe we also want to map solid waste collection points. Okay, you do want to, whatever it is, okay? But for our purpose, I'm going to focus on these 2. Okay, so when it comes to water points, what do we want to collect, okay, about the water points? So you are formulating your data model. So again, depending on the feedback that Red Cross will give you or ADR will give you, depending on that feedback, then you can have a list of what you want to collect from that. So let's say you want to collect for water points, you want to collect, you probably want to collect the name, maybe not starting with the name, you want to collect the community, of course, you will start with the city where you're located. You want the community. You do want to know, is it man-made water point, or is it a natural one? Okay, you want to know what type is it. You want to know, is it powered? Okay, is it powered? And depending on the list you get, okay? Once you get that list, remembering that OpenStreetMap is made of the tags for OpenStreetMap. It's a key which is equal to a value. So that pair is really, really, really important. Knowing that the key value pair for OpenStreetMap. So with that knowledge, then I'm going to put this into a table. Let me just create just 3 columns where I have the key here, I have the value, and I can add a bit of comments. Okay, comments there. So in this case, the things that I want to map include the city, community. Is it a man-made, or what type of water point is it, and is it powered? So I will begin by thinking through these, and because I want to push this data to OpenStreetMap, I probably want to see how OpenStreetMap is mapping water points. So I would come here and search for, let's see, water points. It will likely not be the way I've written it. So I will click on drinking water, because most of these water points are for drinking water purposes. So this is drinking water. Okay, I can see several ways and several tags that I used here. So I can also find another one which is called water point, actually. So let's look at that. What you're doing is you're checking the tags, the tagging system of this feature that you really want to map. Okay, so you do have amenity equals drinking water, natural equals spring, amenity equals fountain, man-made equals water well, man-made equals water tap. So then I will get these and include these in my data model. For instance, I do have, so for city, address city is the tag, and here you will just include your text, for example, for the city that you're going to be mapping. And then you want to add also address, say the commune, where we will be conducting these activities. Again, this will be entered. Now from there, you come to the amenity tag, because it's a water point. So water points are tagged, they fall under the amenity category in OpenStreetMap. So this is going to be, we've seen the 2 different options here. It can be drinking water, or it can be water point. Okay, so I can just take this and just have that here. This keeps, okay. Okay, so you have it there. It's a water point, or it can be drinking water. And then the next is man-made. And here, usually the value is yes. You do want to look at that as man-made equals yes. If you don't know, but if you know, you can give the different categories. It can be, and you can see what this is here. So we have water well, we have water tap, we have drinking fountain. So this is what I will quickly pick from here. So we can say, oops, we can say water well, then water tap, since we have specifics here, we can just keep it at that. And then the other is natural. It can be, there are different options that have been provided as well, where we do have, it can be a spring, it can be a creek, it can be whatever it is. So let's give some examples here. Keeps freezing. Okay. Okay, there we are. So it can be spring, it can be a creek, depending on what it is. It can be a river. So this is how you actually create a data model. And there are several examples that we provided on the toolbox. You can visit that later on, and you can have more examples and other examples that you can use. Okay, so in terms of creating a data model, what I wanted to highlight is you need to, first of all, have the stakeholders participate in that process, then identify the map features you're going to be mapping, and then identify the attributes you're going to be working with, you're going to be collecting from the field. Okay, so that's essentially it. Identify the map feature, it's a building, it's we're going to be mapping water points, we're going to be mapping waste collection points. Then what we want to map in those waste collection points. So you can first of all get an initial list from your stakeholders, which you can build up on when you come to the map features wiki, which will tell you the different features you want to map. If you want to map buildings, for example, you will look at, just search for buildings there, and you will see the different attributes that these ones do have, the different attributes that buildings have. These are all listed up. It also gives you some information about the building itself and all of that. Okay, so that information is here. But we should also note that for buildings, we do actually tag buildings as building equals something. Okay, so that's why you're seeing the recommended tags here. So if you click on building, it will open up a list of examples that you can use. For example, it can be building equals apartment, building equals cabin, building equals detached, depending on what you really want to use. Again, and this is how you also want your project, your data collected in the field to be, okay? Because then you are able to send it to, OpenStreetMap. Okay, so that's the part of creating a data model. Now, the next component is creating MB tiles. Okay, and what we, in the past, we've created MB tiles using, there's a tool called Tile Mill. This was used for creating MB tiles until it was managed by Mapbox until it was no longer supported. Now, QGIS has very wonderfully integrated the use of MB tiles. If you do remember in this presentation, I had this slide here. This is an MB tile. It's a base map that has buildings laid on top of it, and in the background you have the different the buildings. You have the imagery as well in the background. So this is helpful, especially for OpenMapKit. So let's look at how to create MB tiles. Let's look at how to do that. Sorry that it keeps rejecting, going back to that. Okay. Cool. So in QGIS, sharing my screen again. In QGIS, you do have, first of all, you have an area of interest that you are going to be working in, which I've called AOI here in this example. Okay, so probably I'm going to collect data in just one of these. And for this case, I was looking at Sotuba, where I've added the imagery over that area. And to give you a picture of what we'll be doing, you will be collecting data in this entire area. This is the wider area that you'll be collecting data, maybe with a team of about 10 to 20 mapping members or volunteers. So then you want to be able to divide this into smaller areas that will be manageable for those members to map. Okay, but before we go to that, let's look at how to create this MB tile. Remember, the MB tile is just the base map that will be used by the different mappers in the field in OpenMapKit especially. But also actually ODK lately has the option of adding a base map so that you can use that base map to do the data collection. So in QGIS, we, especially QGIS 3.0 and above, you are able to create MB tiles. What you will do is go to the toolbox and you will search for MB tiles. Usually that's it's a raster functionality, so it will be in MB tiles, that will be in the raster tools. So you want to use this one, generate XYZ tiles, which are also called MB tiles. So select that. And here you are going to select the extent. If you do have the X min, X max, Y min, and Y max, then you can enter those, but you can also actually just select from the map canvas. So come to the map and say, I actually want to start, let me say, my mapping work from this area. Okay, or maybe let's get an MB tile for this area. Okay, so you can select the area that you want to select to create the MB tile for, and that will be selected. The coordinates will be added automatically. Then you go ahead, and the minimum zoom for that, you can take it as low as maybe 3. So that what that means is that you can zoom in up to that level, that zoom level, which you can be able to see the buildings, and actually it goes up to the pixels of that particular image that has been exported. And then you can also determine your maximum zoom. So let's say maybe let's call it 22. DPI, the higher the better and the heavier it will be. So I'll leave it at the 96, which is the default one there. And I think for this to move quickly, I'll increase the minimum zoom to probably 16. And so the tile format is going to be JPEG. And you can increase this to maybe 80, but I'll just leave it at 75. This I'll also leave it at 4. And then I'll go ahead and save to file. I'll just put it here and call it, let me call it Sotuba 02, for example. So save that and run. So what Qgis is doing is to actually go ahead and generate the MB tile for you. Okay, so you may want to, sorry, I'll let this run. You may want to include some, for example, when we create the sections, you may want your MB tiles to just be covering the different sections. So we're going to look at that as well. So this is going to take a few, it was slightly big, but the bigger the area of interest, the bigger it is. Yes, Geoffrey.
I think we're not seeing the other windows that are opening up. Only see the Qgis main window.
Yeah, this is the only one that I was showing at this point. Okay.
Okay, you can continue. I think they're like when you were doing the settings for the MB tile, there's some other like dialog box which was popping up that we were not seeing.
Oh, you didn't see the settings for the. Okay, that's weird. This I can.
Yeah, I think I have like to share like the whole desktop for other windows to show.
Sure. So let me do that. I can actually just select only one. Okay, the desktop here, here we go. You're able to see that now.
Yes, we can see the other windows
Okay.
now.
Okay, so that means you didn't see the settings. You didn't see this window.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you just heard what I said. So let me just create a very small area. This is what I said. You can select the area here, that the extent that you're going to create your MB tile for. So I go to the map canvas, and in this demo, let me just do a small area. Let me just do these houses here. So that is selected. The minimum zoom is going to be 16. And we made this one to be 22, the maximum zoom. We left the DPI, this is the resolution. We left this as it is, and we changed the tile format to JPEG. This is the format that the MB tile will use, and the rest was left the same. So let's save our MB tile. I'll call this one 3, and then you save that and run. So this is a bit quick because we've selected a small area. Now, as I mentioned, these MB tiles are used for OpenMapKit, especially if you're going to be mapping buildings. So this is done. Close this. I can now bring this MB tile to, say, to Qgis, and then I'll be able to see that. I'll be able to see it. If you see, let's see, first remove this. It actually does take everything, every layer that you have on that map, on that MB tile. So I do have the imagery, and I have this imagery now. It's not online. It's just within just this MB tile, which I can load on a mobile phone, head out to the field, and I download I also have the layer for buildings overlaid on, and then I start mapping in that area. This brings me to the other section, which we wanted to look at. I think that is the creation of sections. So you probably are going to be having this entire area for your mapping teams, and you do want to divide it out into small manageable areas for your team. For example, if I look at this, what you will do here is to create a new file. I'll create a shapefile in this case, and yeah, so let's just create a shapefile here. This is it. And we'll put it here. We'll call it sections, and it's going to be polygons. Let's just give it a section as the field, and yeah, click OK. So that is created. Now, if I start creating these sections, we're working in QGIS here, you edit that, and then you come here. The logic behind these sections is that you want your team, a team of maybe 2 to 5 mappers, to be able to cover that in just one day. I think, okay, to cover that in just one day, or in a few hours. So depending on what your plan is, that's when I'm just making this a bit transparent with the background, and maybe I want also to change the color so that it's fairly visible and easily visible on the map. Okay, so these are the sections that I'm creating, and so that's section 1. You do want to create another one. Now, in creating this other one, you may or may not, but it's preferable to use snapping. So I'll just go ahead and not use it yet for now. So you can create this other section looking at, preferably these sections should actually look at physical features that are divisible easily by the mappers, for example. So in this case, I probably want to, I'm estimating that this will be usable, easily mapped by a team of 5 mappers in a day. So if we take that road and take this road and then go around this road and connect to this other road, and then I want these mappers to map that entire building, come over to this river section, come back here, and then this is section number 2. Okay, so now if I label these sections with that, click OK. The number is there, but not visible, so I'll check that, increase it to probably 12 and give it a different color, preferably same or similar color too, and then give it a buffer as well of probably 0.7. Okay, so this is section 2, this is section 1. You can go ahead and create these sections across this entire area, so that you know that our mapping activity is going to follow this this order. So probably here you will come straight up to here and go up to the this road and then join, so that this is, maybe that would be so big, so you may want to have that. Okay, maybe that's fairly small, and this is section number 3. So I think I'll stop with that. So these are your sections. Now, when it comes to generating your MB tiles, you really want to have all of these boundaries shown there for the MB tile to include these different sections. Okay, so that's that. Yeah, so I think I'm going to stop the creation of sections, and I'm looking at the time, of course, going. And if anyone has a question around this, please feel free to bring that question up. What I wanted you to know here is when you're going to map, it's preferable you select different sections of those areas that you're going to map. Okay, so let me stop this section here and go to the other one that had been requested. Creating of sections, this is what we've done. This has been done as well in QGIS. Okay, so the creation of sections really is in QGIS or any other software that you use. And finally, I also wanted to look at the creation of forms, providing a difference between forms that are going to be used for ODK or Kobo collect and forms that are going to be used for OpenMapKit. Remember, the difference between these two applications is that OpenMapKit is used for mapping buildings. The major use case has been mapping buildings in most of our workflows. So if you ever plan to map buildings, this is the go-to application you want to use. And here is an example of a form that you can build. For this, just providing an example. Probably let me begin with okay, let me begin with the ODK form. Okay, which is the water point form. If you've not had prior, work with creation of these forms, I would really recommend xlsform.org. This is the format. Would simply call it a format that these forms are created in. So XLS form is a tool that will help you to build your forms for both ODK and OpenMapKit, or even Kobo as well. Okay, so this, I will not say much about this. I will just recommend it to you for use in your work. Now for ODK forms, you can see, and this is what you also find in XLS form, that an ODK form is made of 3 sheets. Which,
David, do you mind doing a Ctrl+ to increase the size of the text a bit?
Okay. Is that
that's better?
better? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So you do have a survey sheet, you do have a choices sheet, and then you do have a settings sheet. This is an ODK form. So you are going to remember when we talked about setting up your data model. So you will do that will help you to build this form actually. that will help you to build this form indeed. So this is what we are having here. Select one natural. This is the formatting of XLS form. Select one, yes, no, water source. So these are the different names which we would call keys in our data model. So this would be the key, and then whatever you enter in the label is what will be the value. For example, mechanical distribution pump, okay? And then is the water pumped away, for example? Then you can say yes or no, you can answer yes or no. This is the key, and then this will be the value that you've entered in your data model, actually. So that's that. And in terms of building forms, I think if you have any questions, specific questions in building forms, I think this would be like another session that you may want to have, but just wanted to demonstrate and to show you that you can build the forms which you download and upload to the server. I think there was a question on server options. So this being an ODK form, you can use this on Kobo Toolbox, which is where I have actually uploaded it, and will be able to download it and use it on my mobile device. Now, the other one is for buildings. The difference is just in one field that is added. I think for OpenMapKit, you can go to openmapkit.org. This will help you to work with this application, how it works. And so the team has done quite a good job with the documentation. So you can look at the documentation, several examples of how to create surveys, in this case, creating forms. You can look at that, how to create offline base maps. This is what we've been creating in QGIS. The process here is a bit different from what QGIS has, and this is for quite a number of years ago. So recommending going with the QGIS way of creating those base maps, or what we call MB times. So this is an explanation of how the different forms are created, OpenMapKit forms are created. So please, I would recommend you to checking this out for further guidance on building those forms. Okay, so let me look at the server options, whereby we have ODK forms and OpenMapKit forms. So for ODK, let me close some of these. Oops. Okay, so we have the ODK forms. I'm using Kobo Toolbox for that. I should mention that you can use ODK forms on OpenMapKit server. So if you are going to do a data collection exercise, you can use just one server for your work, which is the OpenMapKit server. But if you do have buildings in that exercise, then you will need the, and you do only have Kobo Toolbox, you will need to set up an OpenMapKit server. There's documentation on GitHub for HotOSM GitHub. You can access information on how to set up OpenMapKit server, okay? Or you can get in touch with our team. But also if you're good enough with tech, then you can actually set it up for yourself. Cool. So so that's that, and let's see what else. Okay.
Yeah, there are some questions. Let me know whenever you're ready to take them on.
Okay. So I think in terms of setting yourself up for data collection, once you do have your data model, you do have your embeders. If you're going to use you know, OpenMapKit, or if you need them, then that's that. You are going to create sections. This is really, really important for managing your team. in the field, and then you're going to have your forms created. With these, you should be able to go ahead and conduct your field mapping activity. Let me do a quick run through the hot toolbox, which really covers most of what I've talked about. So it's just the introduction. You can read the documentation. At the moment, the toolbox is in 2 languages, French and English. We're really looking forward to having it in more languages. And if you would like to do some of that translation, please feel free to contact us. And then we can work with you to translate it into your local language. But the toolbox really does have different sections here that look at, of course, this introduction to the toolbox, looking at designing and coordinating your mapping project. There are so many things there that most of these we've looked at today, but there are things like which hardware to use, how do I determine the type of font to use, how do I determine the type of application to use. So we've provided a bit more information here for you to refer. Digitizing and editing OSM, this is the remote mapping part of it, which we many of you really do contribute to. And if you've not, this would be a very enriching section for you to learn more. Then there's a technical setup for the field mapping exercise. How do you set up OpenMapKit? How do you set up ODK? Which applications can you select? Navigation applications as well. I've not talked about OSM, and here I've not talked about maps.me, but all of those can be used for your field mapping activity. Talked about the data cleaning, the different data export tools that are there that can be used, then the data analysis, and we've provided also examples of some of the mapping workflows that we've used in the past. So this is a tool I'm definitely recommending for you to refer to for further enrichment of your mapping plans. Okay, so Jeffrey, any questions?
Yes, yeah, we have several questions. One from Victor is, what is the connection between OMK and ODK? What's the difference between COBOL and OMK in data management? And can OMK and COBOL work without ODK?
Okay, so what's the connection between OMK and ODK? The connection is just right here. I should mention that ODK is built, OMK is built on ODK, okay? This is why if you, in this form, if you take out this sheet here of OSM, you will, what remains will be an ODK form, okay? So the difference is that OMK is designed to be able to collect information that can be sent to OpenStreetMap. ODK is not, ODK and COBOL applications are not designed for that. This is why if you take a look at, you see, you do have buildings. If you see this, you do have building levels, okay? In OMK, you can have, this is the actual tag in OpenStreetMap, building : levels. But this very tag will not be accepted in ODK. So for instance, for ODK, you will, instead of having, let me search for something here. Instead of having, okay, for instance, the address district, if we have this as address : which is, this is the actual tag for OpenStreetMap. If you do have this in ODK, this will give you an error if you're sending this up on a server. So the difference there is that ODK is not built for OpenStreetMap data collection, whereas OMK has been designed for that particular purpose. And if you go to the documentation here, there is a very good explanation around that. Okay, and I think that answers both of those questions. What's the difference and how does OMK and ODK connect? What is the difference? That's where the difference is. The one is built on top of, is built off the other, but the purposes are slightly different. Okay.
Thanks. Another one from Caleb. How do we post MB tiles from Qgis to online?
Yeah, how do we post MB tiles from QGIS to online? I'll give you an example here. Let me see, where did I put this? MB tiles. This is 5 MBs. The other is 29 MBs. So pushing them online is going to be a challenge if you have bigger sections. Some of them may be 100 MBs, some of them may be maybe 200 MBs, but if they are small, then OpenMapKit has provided, OpenMapKit server has provided a way of doing this. I'm showing you an example of the OpenMapKit server here. So you have an option. If you set up an OpenMapKit server, you have an option of uploading forms as well as uploading deployment. So if you do determine that you actually need to send these MB tiles online on the server, then you can use the deployment section here, where you can create a deployment folder, which I may call in this case Bamako. Create the deployment. Okay, there it is created. And then I can upload. You see the different options here. You can upload an MB tile, or you can upload a .osm layer, or a GeoJSON. So again, you can, so I think that answers your question. I think it was Carol. You can do that. What we've found to be more working in the field, especially if you have bigger teams and you have enough resources, enough manpower, you can easily copy these and transfer them to the mobile phones. So you connect, you plug up the phone to your computer using a cable, and then you're able to actually, I think, open, let me see, your phone, and then you do have ODK and OpenMapKit here. So in OpenMapKit folder, this is where you will be putting your MB tiles and your OSM layers. In this case, I don't have any, but I can, oh, I do have some here from one of the projects we've been working on. So this is, these are the different, you can have several MB tiles there. Okay, you can have several MB tiles there, and then they can keep, you can use them. You can use them. For OSM layers, this is where you will download a particular area in OpenStreetMap. Probably you can use JOSIM. Let me just, let me look for a small area in Bamako. This is Bamako here. And I think Sotuba was around this area. Okay, so let me just pick a small area like that. Okay, that's not very well mapped, unfortunately. So let me, yeah, this is fairly good. So this might be your area where you are going to conduct the mapping in the field, and what you want to download is buildings, just buildings. Okay, just buildings. So you build that query and then build and execute. Yeah, there we are. Then you can download as, let's see, you can download, oh yeah, you can just simply download because there's nothing in JOSM here. Okay, these are the buildings. You've only downloaded the buildings, so you can save this as your I think on the desktop, this way I can keep this, and then you can call this so tuba.osm, save that, okay, which you can now transfer to this folder. So if I can go back to this, where is it? It's here, so tuba.osm, then I can transfer this to this folder. Now, on my phone, unfortunately, I'm not showing that here, but if I go now to, after having transferred MB tiles in MB tiles folder and the OSM, in the OSM folder, then in your OpenMapKit, you're able to see those base maps and then use the form. Okay. Geoffrey, any other questions? Okay, any other questions there? Okay, so Geoffrey, are you still there? If not, I'll just look at this. How do you say, yeah. Oh, could you give an example of data cleaning? Okay, okay, cool. Let me see. Let me see. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, David?
Yes, please. Okay, an example of data cleaning. I will give you an example of some of the points I think on this form. So data cleaning will depend on what it is.
Before you take on that one, there was a question from
sure.
There was a question from Yusuf asking about MB tiles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what's the recommended maximum and minimum zoom levels when creating MB tiles? That was a question from Yusuf.
Yeah. So the recommended maximum is 20. You can do 22 as your maximum, and you can do what we found to be really working very well has been around starting with 13 as the minimum zoom, and then the maximum being 22. If you go up to 23, 24, the quality will be very good. It will be, on the other hand, very heavy. So if you load it on your mobile phone, you'll be taking up a lot of space. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think the last question, we at the half-hour mark. The last question we can take is from Victor asking, what is the recommended tool to use for data collection for a beginner? Do you recommend Kobo? Do you recommend ODK? Do you recommend OpenMapKit? What's the recommended tool for beginners?
Yeah, so for beginners, the recommended tool is, that's a tricky one, excuse me, because it depends on what data you're going to collect. If you are going to collect just point data, go for ODK. Go for ODK. If you're going to collect buildings data, it's going to be OpenMapKit. That will be the tool you will use. But if you're going to use, if you're going to collect points, you're going to just do a survey in the field, you're just going to conduct a survey, go for ODK. Incidentally, ODK and Kobo collect, they are just the same thing. It's just the name that is the difference. And of course the colors and what have you, but when you look at the functionality of the color of the tool, sorry, it's just the same thing. So yeah, go for ODK. I would go for ODK because of course it has a very good, very active community of developers. It has so many new functionalities added to it. And so, yeah, I would recommend that.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. Yeah, before we wrap up, I just want to make an announcement. So next week, Hot will be releasing version 4 of the new of the tasking manager. So on that day, on the 6th of April, if you are preparing any mapathons, please, I think it's better to leave out that day, because I think the task manager will be migrating and may not be really available. So yeah, watch out for that sake. And yeah, let's embrace the new task manager. I think there's a lot of wonderful new features for mapping. Yeah, 6th of May is the date when it's going to be released. Yeah, if you have questions about technical things in relation to this webinar, there is a Slack channel. There's a channel called Mapper Support on our Slack channel. So I think you can ask questions there. David is also there. You can help answer some of your questions. But I think we'll also be doing more of these technical webinars during our community webinar. We don't have one webinar every month. So I think in the future we can have a few more of the technical ones. Yeah, I think that's it. I just want to again say thank you, David, for today, and thank you everyone for attending.
Great. Thanks for having us, Geoffrey.